Final Fantasy VII Remake news. So this is of Mike Fahey from Kotaku. So people are already playing Final Fantasy VII Remake in Australia. So he has the breakdown here. When Square Enix announced physical copies of Final Fantasy VII Remake would ship to Europe and Australia earlier than its April 10th release date due to COVID-19 pandemic, we didn't think they meant this early. The eagerly anticipated game is already in the hands of many Australians, as evidenced by a growing number of Twitch streams and YouTube videos. Quote, love living in Oz right now, end quote, reads the title of one of the numerous Final Fantasy Remake live streams on Twitch this morning. 9 days earlier than the official release date, what was supposed to be a global release on April 10th has turned into a strange, staggered release due to complications brought on by the COVID-19 crisis. Another little tidbit that came out in the news yesterday was this new Final Fantasy VII Remake is going to be a 100 gigabyte file size, which is going to be it's pretty tough. So that's just part one is going to be 100 gigabytes.
Yeah.
Where do you land on the Final Fantasy VII Remake? Are you still pretty stoked? Like, do you think you'll get this day one? Where do you land on it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited for it. I love the demo, and yeah, I think it's going to be sort of one of the top games of the year. So yeah, I'm really really excited for it. This is sort of really caused a storm in sort of the Final Fantasy communities that I sort of like follow on Twitter and Facebook and things, because Square Enix came out at first saying that people might not receive their game on time, so it might be later due to different companies shipping at different times. So a lot of people were then cancelling their pre-orders and sort of saying they were going to purchase it digitally or keeping their pre-orders. Because some people have paid over $300 for these special editions.
Gotcha.
So some people were just opting to buy the digital one as well and dropping another $60 on the game. And then their physical copies are actually coming early. So you've got those people who are kind of annoyed that their games come earlier in a way. And then you've got the people who are just purely jealous that these people have got the game early, and that apparently people are starting to spoil the game, which I don't really understand how you can spoil the story for 7. I understand that they've added in some new elements and new twists and things, but yeah, I mean, and also you can just stay off social media, I mean, if it's that important, but yeah, this has really caused a bit of a storm.
Yeah, it's kind of a bummer, and it's also something you can't, control with the whole COVID thing, messing up shipments and all that. But it is a bummer to be waiting for your copy and seeing other people playing it. I know I read some frustration on Twitter from other outlets not being able to, because this game is still under embargo, the review, so they can't talk about this game yet. People are playing it. It's it's basically in people's hands at this point, but they still can't talk about the reviews. But they did go to explain why that 100 gigabyte file size was necessary for the remake. So this is of Matt Kim of IGN. Final Fantasy VII Remake will take up over 100 gigabytes on your hard drive. One of the reasons why the RPG clocks in so much storage space, even as part one of the multi-part release, is because Square Enix created custom assets for every part of Midgar. In an interview with US Gamer, Final Fantasy VII Remake co-director Naoki Hamaguchi said that rather than thinking about repurposing standard assets for individual locations like the slums or the Shinra building, we decided to build each location using unique assets to achieve the quality desired for Final Fantasy VII Remake. I guess it does show off this way because I'm playing that demo. All of the textures, all of the in-game stuff is incredibly beautiful, so maybe it's worth it for them to really try and push this to 100 gigabytes. I mean, you're getting your money's worth for a remake, but it's just kind of ridiculous at face value to see part 1 being 100 gigabytes.
Yeah, I think because although it is part 1, I think they've said before as well that this game is going to be just the first part is going to be as big, if not bigger, than any of their other Final Fantasy mainline games. I think it's more in the vein of, I know you're not a huge fan of Final Fantasy, but for example, you got Final Fantasy X, which had Final Fantasy X Part 2. You had Final Fantasy 13, which actually ended up being a trilogy, so it went to 13.2 and 13.3. So I think it's more in that vein, so each part will be a full Final Fantasy game, a fully fledged game.
Gotcha.
Just they'll have sequels within that world, because each numbered Final Fantasy game is in its own world. It's not related to any other Final Fantasies, apart from some shared enemies and sort of little nuances like that. So I think they're just planning on making it into a saga, sort of, because they obviously have so much ambition for the story and fleshing it out and adding so much to these characters, which again is another thing that people are very divided on. I think it's a really good thing. I think that the difference between JRPGs from the late 90s, early 2000s, and the difference between JRPGs now is huge. And I think the only way for this, because it's not just a game, it's the world and the characters and the story that people love. If you play the game now, it's horrible, but it's the world and the characters and the music and everything that encapsulates you in. So I think it deserves to be fleshed out and to have this much effort, having unique assets created, all of this, it deserves that. And the only way to get sort of what it deserves is to stagger the release and flesh it out so that it can really be this epic that it deserves to be. But yeah, I think I can't say I've heard. I'm sure it's happened in other games, but yeah, that sounds pretty unique and amazing. But you do wonder whether that means if it's going to be limited in the amount of locations there's going to be, because there is surely a line where that only so much can be done in a certain amount of time. But at least it shows that they care about the quality and that they're putting everything into it.
Yeah, no, that's 100%. I mean, especially with a game like Final Fantasy VII that is so near and dear to many gamers' hearts. It's like it's always in the top 10, top 50 games of the generation or of our generation. It's always on that list. So to treat a remaster rather, you have to do it with the care necessary, and that means fully fleshing out each level and exactly, respecting it. So I mean, you can't lose if you do that.
No, and I mean, just from the trailers, I've seen that there's new villains, so there's completely new characters in it. There's I don't know if you've seen for the trailer, there's like another soldier who's like the same thing Cloud is, and he's not in the original, but it seems like he could be perhaps the villain of the first part, which and again, people like to look at this from the perspective of that they're doing this just to make money, but then on the other hand, they'll also talk about how amazing this world is and how deep this world is and how rich with lore it is. Yeah, if you play the original game, that lore is in text boxes and like tiny little things that you have to read, whereas now they have the ability to really expand on this world that everybody loves, really flesh out these characters, because they're not just going to be text boxes and little polygons anymore.
Right.
They're going to have emotions and so there's so much more they can explore. And if they were, and people say things like, "Oh, I'm just going to wait for the whole thing to be out." And
Good luck, man.
Yeah, and if Square took the time to, still be as ambitious as they're being, but make the entire game, then not only would it take years and years, but how are they going to financially sustain like a 10-15 year development cycle? They have to release it in parts.
Right.
So they can make money to carry on making the rest of the game. It's not free to make these games, especially not if they're building unique assets for everything. So right. I think I find that quite frustrating, especially considering I'm not even the biggest Final Fantasy VII fan, but I'm still like chuffed that they're choosing to flesh this out, because I know that the world is like full of like really amazing lore and the characters are all really interesting and the story's great. And I just don't see why people can't see that.
No, you bring up some good points. I mean, that really is the only realistic way to keep this game afloat, is to release it in chunks, because it is so massive. You can't be working on this for a good 5, 6, 7, 10 years and then produce something. That production cost would be through the roof. So at least if you can kind of make back on that investment, because they still have stockholders, they have shareholders, they have people they have to answer to. So releasing that in chunk fully funds the game, and you get a more expanded experience. So it's like, how could you find anything wrong with that? But
yeah, and a big problem with the original Final Fantasy VII is, there's a character that dies in it. I mean, I'm sure you probably know. I mean, it's kind of like a Darth Vader as Luke's father kind of spoiler. But you can't level when you play the original and you know that they're going to die. You don't bother leveling them up or grinding them or getting their best weapons or anything. Whereas this remake is looking like the first part will end just before their death, or maybe even end at their death, which would then mean that this sort of soul experience, this sort of like separate experience, it means every single character you can fully invest in, you can fully level up and grind, and
Gotcha.
And I think story wise, because there is, like I said, that the story is, because of the time it came out, it's just text boxes. There's no voice acting. The cutscenes are very limited. Yet there's so much to say and to talk about, and there's such a big story to tell. And so I think that, you know, they need to flesh it out. They need to explore different avenues that maybe weren't explored in the first game, and explore things that weren't explored quite as much as they could have been.
Yeah.
And yeah, the Final Fantasy VII original, it's on PS4. You can play it. You know, if you don't want to play the remake, the original's still there.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah, it's I don't see how people are still. That's always the risk you have with anytime you remake or dig back into a property people love. You know, you're always gonna have people that get angry. I mean, but it doesn't erase the other one that we all love. So it's like that one still is there. So just play that one or watch that one.
Yeah.
Now there was something this morning, just kind of like a wonky, just a weird glitch or something that's happening with Final Fantasy IX. So this article is from IGN. They have the details. The latest update for Final Fantasy IX on Steam has seemingly removed the entire game, making it unplayable. A handful of threads have been made on the Final Fantasy IX general discussion board on Steam, with all of them discussing the sudden disappearance of the game. The update, which went live at some point in the last 24 hours, has reduced the game's file size to 0 megabytes, effectively rendering it gone completely. So Square hasn't responded yet on this, but so it's just a glitch that just erases your game. So yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yep,
I love Final Fantasy IX.
Yeah, I've never played that one as well, but yeah.
Yeah, that's
a bummer.
That's great. Yeah, I think people are constantly like moaning about Final Fantasy games being really buggy on Steam as well. So people are going to go into meltdown over that.